So good morning to you. Good morning, all of you. I was so looking forward to being here. Now that I'm here, I'm actually enjoying being here deeply. I don't say this lightly, and I don't say it frequently because I rarely do retreats like this. This is the first time in probably a year and a half. I purposely ceased retreat leading about 10 years ago and chose to want to be in life and meet people naturally rather than in circumstances like this, and equally choosing more adventurous, diverse environments that led me to people who I normally wouldn't meet. Not that all of us aren't people who I wouldn't want to meet. And that's one of the reasons why I chose Bali, to meet people like us. It's very rare in the world to see so many different nationalities, an overt sense of caring about who you are and life and relationships. I wanted to say spiritual life. I didn't mean that. I find there's an enormous amount of caring here. Sometimes it's shadowed by the natural denied states of egoism and pride, self-centeredness, and even at times I dare use the word narcissism. But that's natural. I don't want to condemn any state of consciousness. Point one today. I'd like to invite you, hold yourself accountable. Encourage that part of your heart and soul and mind and source that refuses to participate in any self-denigration. Yes, study the textures of complexity, affliction, hurt, sadness. It was brought up a number of times, grief. But refuse to participate in you having done something wrong. That's a very important transition to feel without demonization of source. So that's point one today, is try to embody, try to emotionally enact. Point two, the living, breathing oxygenation of positive transformational presence. I am a being who's broken and whole simultaneously for life. Chill. It ain't gonna change. You think you've reached safe ground, and there's an earthquake in your soul called the loss of a limb, the death of a loved one. And you have to integrate, as we know so well, the unthinkable horrors of being born on a planet that the children are screaming out today, hey, you adults, we're coming possibly to late-stage capitalism and the end of civilization as we've known it. This isn't a history lesson. It's happened before, though. It's no longer business as usual. We're in a heightened state of anything is possible should we choose to do it. What's the emotion? Can I breathe into the transformational beauty of my being? People ask about meditation, the transformational beauty of my being. Beauty is a little bit of a loaded word. Point three today. You have your notebooks out. Write any time, please. What are the states? Pause, Alan. Post-religion, post-tradition, post-lineage, post-teacher. We're looking into the universal nature of human consciousness on the terms of what transforms us into beautiful states of mind and how we can overcome afflictive states. It doesn't belong to a culture, a language, an ism, or a teacher. It's a distillation of all systems and an evolution beyond them. I invite us, what are the states of mind that you are choosing as an individual to inhabit and to evolve inside of self and to co-evolve with the people in our lives that we know and that we meet? Two forms of meditation: interior self-evolution, development, elevation, and interrelated transformational presence in context. Clear? What are those states of mind that you want to define your life by? When I shifted from sincerity to satire, I had no idea how to say something satirically. I was so wedded, embedded in the paradigm of a constancy. Pause. How many of you have done voice lessons, acting lessons? Maybe a few, okay? When I started into theater, I had a voice coach. I had no idea what to expect. For the first 5 or 6 sessions, she had me simply move in natural rhythms any way that I wanted to move, and to make nonsensical sounds coordinate with my body movements, so that I wasn't able to make coherent sentences and phrases. Just, whatever needed to be done. What the result was for me, as I moved into these spontaneous physical movements, making sounds for no more than 10 or 15 minutes, it was like a cathartic experience of becoming totally unglued from my familiar habitat of inner auditory frequencies and bodily movements. I was normally confined either to asana on a cushion, on a mat, or walking around or sitting in a chair. But when I moved like that, not to music, I didn't have the artifice of music, but just my own sounds, I became completely vulnerable. I didn't know my identity. My point is, I find that the DNA, the brain, the body, the anatomy, the psychic anatomy, the emotional ecosystem of being, all those textures are programmed, and we all know the word neuroplasticity today, the influence of consciousness on the brain. Well, I didn't really know that at that time, that we're in a habitat, a predictable pattern a lot of the time, that we see emotionally and psychologically and spiritually. We become familiar and unknown on how familiar we are to patterning. So to move from sincerity to satire required a completely different set of neurological muscles. She was basically stretching my interior world that meditation didn't do. So I'm encouraging you, what are the states of mind that you want to dance into? It's so easy to stay at the container level of what you can't do and develop teachings on how to overcome what you can't do. Can't do Dharma sells. Beautification, evolution, higher status frequency is for entertainment, theater, movies, and artists. They inhabit states that aren't familiar. I would encourage you to evoke your inner actor. Stop being so radically sincere, dimensionally predictable. Break out of neo-tantraism. Be your own uninhabited, totally lost in outer space, cognitively rooted in integrity. Huge issue for me. Trust, safety, integrity, and conscience. If you don't have those 4 qualities on your palette, you're a loser. Quote yourself. You can't be trusted. You're unreliable. My integrity is not intact. I could give a fuck about conscience. That's a loser. If we don't inhabit those states of mind and make a 5 rhythms life out of those fuckers, we're inhabiting loser. Trust, safety. What does integrity even mean? I would beg of you to have a dialogue about that. What does conscience mean? You look at the preamble, and I'll close here. the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the blueprint for civilized democratic society in the world, agreed upon by most nations of the world, 30 different articles, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of assembly. To violate those basic freedoms, the scourge of war has shown us throughout history the results of when those human rights are breached, and when people lose conscience and dignity, all hell breaks loose. So look at all of us here. We've come together. That took a freedom of mind. That's violated in most countries in the world called dictatorships and totalitarian governments. The freedom of thought. I just don't understand why anyone would want to overcome their thinking. I would want to evolve my thinking, but God forbid that I lose the capacity to think, or thinking that no thought is a better way to be than inhabiting incredibly passionate, clear, intimate, transformational. I could tell Nina, you're a very interesting lady. Why would I want to abandon that communication? So my point here is, we're inherently free, inhabiting greater freedoms. Is that true for you? We're inherently free. No one came here. You brought yourself here. Own it. You're the one sitting where you are. You're the one who can choose your posture. I'm inhabiting the posture that I want to sit in. Is that true? Look around. Look at all the different postures. Everyone has chosen freely how they want to sit. That to me is really interesting. But do we abscond from that choice-making freedom? Do we keep it sacred? So we want to dignify that posture. We want to create stature in it, create importance in it. So the point here is immediacy. People ask about meditation. Where do you do it? What's the retreat? Where's the training? It always comes back to one word: immediate. If you're not living in immediacy, second point of being a loser. No one would ever think about breathing tomorrow and giving it up today, any more than you would think about meditating tomorrow and giving it up today. How do you equate meditation, transformation, intimacy, honor, dignity, integrity, and conscience to analogous to breathing? The word immediate. So people ask about meditation. How do you integrate it? You never can integrate it. Immediate occupation of beautiful states of mind now. Immediate occupation of who I want to be now. So the idea of being in the moment is disgusting to me, unless there's an intelligence to inhabit a beautiful state of mind on the terms of my integrity, right here, right now. And so I invite you, let's not wait until we meditate to begin to see, oh wow, let me integrate what's being offered here from all of us as an immediate occupation of the person I want to be right now. Pause. If you were to write down the 3 states of mind that you want to be defined by, that you want to know your integrity is rooted in them, you're a reliable individual because these 3 qualities are going to be the foundational presence of my being. What would they be? Take a note. Often people talk about authenticity. Fair enough. People talk about naturalness. It's hard to avoid empathy, caring for self and other. Compassion and empathy, how are they the same and how are they different? Imagine being married to someone who is ungenerous. Oh, how sexy is that? How could you live without being generous? What does it mean to be generous in spirit? It means that I look at you, and you look at me with a sense of empathetic, caring, concern, and openness. Empathetic, concern, and openness. Who would want to be with someone who's not open? How could we not include in those three states of mind openness? Why be open? Especially in a world that's so brutal. Openness contoured by the intelligence of discernment. You see where I'm going with this? Meditation isn't just stillness. It's a whole thing called mindful intelligence. All of those words that we talk to, if we were to spend more than 6 days here, there are specific inner Dharma asanas, like yoga asanas, that cultivate each of those states. Please hear that. They're discernible states that can be evolved. And so if you have questions about any of those states, we don't have the time to put it out there for the 6 days, but we're talking about inner Dharma literacy. Mindful intelligence is the operating system that I come from. Openness. I want to know what it feels like. I want to know what compromises it. I want to know that I'm standing in it. I want to know that I'm evolving it. And I want to understand why openness is important when it's not, well, it must be coupled with discernment. What is discernment? Most people can't even spell it. How do you actualize discernment as a reason to be with this woman? I'm listening to you, I'm looking at you, but I'm also discerning, not judging. That's a different state, isn't it? So the shadow of discernment is judgment. It keeps people locked into a statue of projection. How many of us could understand the emotionality of projection? We talk about it a lot, fair enough? So I'd like to support you in making a page of little words of states of mind that you find affinity to. Give up ever being a Buddhist. Stop reading books. That page is your template of transformation. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to dance. This is my theater of inner consciousness. Are you with me? So you can see that I'm very particular with words. Discernment is very important to me. What does the word boundary point to? It's kind of severe, isn't it? What about something that's more intimate, like I have resilience coupled with patience and openness and discernment, and I'm curious, but I know when I'm being overly available and I suffer the consequences of that lack of discernment. A boundary. How do I know not to be invaded by parasitic minds? How do I know not to be not only pleasing but self-denigrating, to be in the face of a repetitive action that somehow happened when I was younger where I was violated, and I recreate patterns of self-abuse? I would like to invite you, as we go into the next phase of this morning, if many people have talked about the shadow and darkness, and I don't want to give up on that at all. I want to dive into that on your terms. I would like to invite you to openly, cathartically, tenderly, respectfully spend some time today and make a couple of notes on how you denigrate yourself, how you feel that you participate in my own diminishment. How do I abuse myself? If we don't know those things, I don't think there's any real chance of intervening consciously to actually inhabit their positive opposites. So for every state and condition and behavior or pattern that you write, should you want, anyone who wants to speak up, we can look at the positive opposite of that. So you now know clearly, in one clean, swift discussion, what I do, what I could do, and the middle ground is, what benefit does it bring me to participate in self-diminishing psychologies, behaviors, and patterns? There's got to be a value to it. Otherwise, it's just absconding with the idea it's a habit. I've got to find, I really liked cigarettes, frankly. And I knew that it were killing me, but you know what? I wrote really good books when I smoked. And when I stopped, they sucked. It took me 3 years to write again after smoking. I stopped smoking. That was a horrible sacrifice. The other thing is I lost my social tribe. We hung out in Paris, in Zagreb, in Sarajevo. Fucking, you don't go out unless you go to a nightclub or a restaurant. Everyone's smoking and I can't go in there. So no one wanted to hang out with me anymore. I was like a fucking social leper that I wanted to stop smoking. Like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? And so I really doubted my behavior until I moved to the West, and then everyone there didn't smoke, and I met someone who didn't like cigarettes, and so I kind of felt like at home, but it was a high price to pay. So a lot of things that we isolate on, that we don't really like, that we do, I feel there's a high reward for them. I didn't really look into, oh my God, I don't have Marlboro with me today. And no one's emailing, no one's calling, no one's inviting me. Alan's a leper. No offense to lepers out there. And I felt, fuck, maybe I should get like a fake cigarette or something. Or maybe, this is pre-vaping. I would have been rich, not have to do this kind of thing. So I want to ask you, I'm not looking for sadomasochism, but what benefit do your denigrations bring you? What benefits do your habits bring you? What benefits do your areas of semi-denial bring you? I mean, for example, this may be too overt, but I've been, in retreats where we're significantly on, say, day 7 or day 20, where it's really open. Issues of intimacy and sexuality are very much in the forefront. And it's not an uncommon thing that I hear, and maybe you know this as well, maybe it's you, where there's a great disparity between what you do sexually and how you imagine having sex while you're having sex. And for a lot of men, and women too, I've heard this a lot, that there's ways of being intimate that are completely disconnected from your partner. And you perform in ways not so much for her or him, but basically they're a stand-in, if you will, for your inner fantasy. And a lot of people actually have fantasies that are not even connected to their partner while they're having sex. How many couples I've met and how many people I've talked to that actually have to watch porn before they have sex. And they won't even tell their partner these kind of things. So my point is not so much to get into the graphic details of that disconnect, but disconnect is the word. And I'm not marginalizing that as something wrong, but for me, mindful intelligence is inclusivity. I'd want to tell you as my partner, I'm having this incredible disconnect from you. When I make love with you, I'm seeing Madonna. And you go, we're over.
Funny you should say it, I'm seeing Brad Pitt, but it's okay.
Okay, you only have to give $5 now. But if that's your world, you want to be the forefront in the relationship of transparency. Remember how we talked about safety and trust? Yeah, I'm safety and trustworthy, except when my fantasies are there, and it's like, fuck you, you'll never get this out of me, even when I'm on ecstasy. You have a fantasy of someone else when we're making love? No, it's only you, baby. Yeah, only you, only you. And so I ask you, where do you lie? It's all groovy to be beautiful, but ask yourself in the privacy of your notebook that no one will ever see, and make sure that you tear this page and burn it later on in the day. sacred lies that no one on this planet will ever know about you. We used to do this in retreats back in the 90s. I think a thing called process-oriented Buddhist psychology. Day 6, people will have written sacred lies, and those who were daring enough, no one was forced to do it, would stand up. I've been a fuck man. My husband, George, you don't know this, but I'm a sex worker. I was wondering where you get all that money from. Don't stop. I mean, so it kind of heals things if you're more honest. But I don't encourage honesty there. So be watchful of secrets don't mean that you have to reveal them. But to get deeper into the integrity of why is important for me. Why do we do what we do? If we're not the forefront in that investigation, what are we relying on? Ancient books, Carl Jung, some shaman from some Peruvian country to give us some kind of liquid to cathart into some trauma that absconds from the lie that's keeping you dysfunctional, that you blame your dad on? It's lying that's the issue. I had a murder in my family recently. You know, it's not an easy thing to talk about. We had a family reunion recently, 3 weeks ago, in Washington, D.C., just south where I grew up. And a beloved family member killed beloved family members, and then killed his daughter, and then killed himself. The mantra, how could we have not seen this coming? Point, in the catharsis, in the family reunion, the talking, what aren't we asking each other? What aren't we willing to reveal with each other? And going the extra step. Hey, listen, how are you? Not just taking the blanket answer to that, I'm well. Beneath it all, we keep the colossal reservoir of lying intact. I don't really feel that it's an appropriate moment to share the pain that I'm in. I've said it for so fucking long, I run the risk of being abandoned yet again if I tell you the truth of who I am. So, trust and safety, conscience and integrity in relationship is high courage, willingness to create space to listen to that which needs to be shared. Who are we together if we can't share each other's inner world at our depth to avoid these kind of catastrophic examples that I'm sharing with you today? And the planet has gone mad. Wars are the result of the lack of intimacy, I feel. Someone's not talking. They're having to rely on a fucking gun, a bomb, to communicate the evidence of who they are. So, point being, where do you lie? How? Reveal them to yourself. Be so proud in the writing it down. And just make sure that the notebook is highly protected. Your partner never sees it. And at the end of the day today, you be sure to rip it up and to keep that memory in your mind. What aren't you willing to reveal to others is one thing, and I respect the fact of don't reveal it. I'm not advocating total transparency here. I'm just advocating self-honesty. Close here. People ask about meditation. It's the act of self-honesty. So no, you can sit till the end of the moon, but if you're not self-honest in your daily life, it's a waste of time. So what, you've got a little bit of stillness. Who the fuck couldn't be still in Ubud? So remember that meditation isn't sitting as much as it is an inner behavior all the time of self-respect, self-honesty, transparency, integrity, conscience, creating conditions for inner safety, inner trust, those kind of things. So good morning to you. Thank you for being here. We're going to work more with the notebooks on that list yesterday of principal people that compel us, that take from us, that give to us. If you haven't filled out that list, or if you weren't here yesterday morning and you want to do it, in a nutshell in 1 minute. We are who we are as a result of our relationships. None of us could live without each other. We wouldn't want to live without each other. I am a constellation of emotions born from relatedness. Education, movies. I came out of my mom's body from some unknown source. I am a body of chemicals and minds and neurons. I am who I am. I'm learning a language. I'm sharing a language that I learned. A, B, C, D. We learned our emotions. We learned our states of consciousness. We're interrelated creatures. We cannot live without each other. We're not on the side of the riverbank watching the river flow. We're always in the river of change. We are who we are from each other. Ubuntu. So I invite you, write down the principal influences of people. Who are those people that are most influencing the movement of my river? Sometimes it's a whirlpool, an enemy. My husband now has turned into aggressive states. He's basically telling me, I don't know who you are. I've lost contact with you. You really piss me off. I'm in a whirlpool of uncertainty, and the expression of that uncertainty is a natural response of upset and anger. It shouldn't be marginalized as wrong. It's just in a whirlpool. Men and women do this. So part of our energy, who are whirlpools in your life? Where is there anger in you? Where is there fantasy? How many of you have sexual partners, romantic partners? How many marriages and relationships I have met? Like, I'm single right now. I'm consciously choosing to be single. But I'm intimately involved with a lot of different people, but not sexually. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I have a clear boundary right now in my life. I'm still healing something. My point is that many people want to fill in that blank of unfulfilled future. Unfulfilled future. The perception of my future being emptier than it already is to some extent, without her or him or it. Some think of degrees of wealth, some think of degrees of status, some think of degrees of success. Some are in relationships and marriages in which the person they're with, they wish they were someone different. It becomes an idea, and it becomes a fantasy, and slowly it becomes chiseled in stone that you live in the projection of who this person isn't, and the way that you can tolerate her or him is to project who you want them to be. And you live in that equation without any movement on the evolution of that space. A lot of people who are single want to meet people. I won't even ask for hand. It's human. But are we defined by that desire? And who do we imagine that we'll meet is one thing, but are we going about that in a way that allows for the possibility of a new type of meeting? So if you have that little place in your life that is yet to be met in the way that your soul yearns, I'm a real believer in soul yearning. Don't negate that one individual, or if you're, I dare say it, but don't say it, Alan. Just don't say it.
Say it, man. You have to say it, man.
Well, I'm in Ubud. It's like if you're polyamorous, fill in the blank with multiples. You know, just put poly A, B, C, D, E, F, G, F. I don't give a fuck who they are except it's an orifice. Or it's a whatever it is a what do you call the opposite of an orifice? What's the Hindu word for that? What is it? Patuni?
Protrusion.
That's a good word, a protrusion. That's an original Sanskrit word if I ever heard it. That's something very insulting about that. A protrusion. So fill in that blank, in other words, that list of predominant energies, and we'll be working today with the next phase of that. So questions before we take a break? and we go into a sitting meditation with the second level of instruction. Take a moment if there's any questions at all about being here, what we're doing, these lists, the notebooks, whatever it might be for you.
Not a question per se, but we spoke yesterday after you. To see if I can learn a little lessons. We were talking about how to use the microphone in a non-obscene way. No, yesterday we were speaking after at the end of the day and reflecting on the day and a few things that came up. Was it appropriate time now to bring that up?
Sure. Take your time.
Okay. So, yeah, just on reflecting yesterday. So we had the sitting meditation and it was, I found it really interesting because after the end of it, was it 20 minutes? The moment I closed my eyes, I actually found it quite painful. I was like, everything kind of hurt. So my back hurt and I just wanted to run, I wanted to escape. And it was really interesting because I've done meditation retreats and sits and groups for years, but I've got out of the practice of doing sitting meditations. I do try to be a lot more mindful of my activities and mindful and conscious in what I'm doing, and I don't do the sitting meditation so much anymore. And it was really interesting because I was like, then I'd kind of go a few minutes into like find a level of stillness, and then it would be painful again. And there was a part of me that just wanted to run, and it was really interesting because I found it was like a microcosm for life, wasn't it? Sitting through the pain, the stillness, everything in that 20 minutes. But then it made me realise, why I medicated with alcohol for so long. I was like sitting with myself at some stages was really, really fucking uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, now it's clearer for me now, why I chose to medicate. And then I suppose I then wanted to loop in, what we discussed in terms of the conversation around addicts and addiction and that word. And again, I had an opportunity to reflect on our conversation. That's something I'd like to open up with other people here as well. That, because you mentioned it a few times yesterday, that you had a level of respect, if I'm not incorrect, around people who did choose to medicate in this world from their pain and level of pain. And there's a lot of that I agree with because, people who have the genetic predisposition for addiction are generally empaths and they're sensitive and they are intuitive and they deal with that, and in some ways I wear addiction as part of my story as almost a badge of honour. Like, if I'm really honest, it's almost an egotistical thing. I'm like, I'm glad that I felt my pain to such a degree, I pushed it to the edge so far that I almost died, that I then that I came back and looked at life completely differently. And there was just so much that I reflected on yesterday, and we talked about how you classify addiction and who is an addict, and traditional, you're getting a stream of consciousness now. This is all the stuff that's been spinning around.
Then it's good. Zero in, please.
Yeah.
What is the question?
And so, they were the things that I just wanted to share.
Okay.
And then, I wanted to open up the discourse that we opened up yesterday around addiction and powerlessness and using the terminology and the specific words to
Kylie, let me invite you something. Yeah. If to really communicate with you, because you and I have spoken a number of times now, not to interrupt you, but so that you and I really touch that place in each of us that really is going to the soul of this issue, this concern. And may I invite you to take every risk imaginable to so deeply personalize what you're sharing in terms of what it is in you that you want to know for yourself about yourself. Not the theories of meditation or addiction or recovery, but where are you inside grappling with these issues that you want to reveal to this group and or seek some kind of context to have a response. It really is at the soul of this issue.
Yeah, and that's a good pointed question, because the response to that is I'm grappling to find the question. There's just a lot of things that are floating around in my mind. But sorry, just give me a second to...
Let me invite this
Yeah.
then. Let me invite this. With any of you, not just with Kylie. As I said yesterday, and you and I have talked a number of times, what you're bringing up is so important. It's a lifelong grappling for me.
Yeah.
That you shared what you just shared is profound. May I invite you, only if you wish, to just rest, grapple with where you're at inside. Later in the day or earlier today, at the end of this session or sometime at the next level, let's come back around and go back in deeper to, okay, this is what I thought, this is what I feel. And just let what you just shared sit, and we'll come back to it. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Because, yeah, to your point, that's exactly it. It's something that I feel really compelled to open up.
Good. And I'm right with you.
Yeah.
You're not alone. We're not alone in that. Kylie and I have been talking quite a bit about recovery, addiction, all the various words and labels and energies around that world. And I come from, as I've said quite repeatedly, a long history of addictions. And when I say the word, I don't like the word. I don't use it anymore. I use it because it's so embedded in conversation. I don't like who defined addiction. You know, let me just pause for a minute here and just say something. Addiction, to me, and the psychologies and the languaging, the treatment of it is almost exclusively propaganda. It's a cultural, political fucking lie. And until you get that you are hypnotized, indoctrinated in the system of being fucking co-opted, simply by the word addiction, and the ramifications of believing that, you will be enslaved, likely for your whole lifetime, by thinking that something's wrong, that you're always on the lookout for it happening again. And you may even be how many of you, I won't even ask for hands, how many of you are on antidepressants? Don't do it. Don't raise your hand. Up until 9 months ago, I'm talking from experience about this shit. I spent 9 years on Prozac, 10 years on Valium, clonazepam, anyone who does modafinil, one of the finest forms of amphetamine you can find on the planet, used for pilots and astronauts. You talk about caffeine, and you can sleep on it. Your mind is so lucid. You think about ayahuasca, vomiting, it's like, fuck man, give me an astronaut drug. Those guys got it down. Don't be excited by wanting to find it. There's all kinds of it online. I mean, the influence of stuff on consciousness is a better way to hold the idea than I've lost control, therefore I'm doing things that denigrate my life and my family. Therefore the classical meaning of addiction. And I'm not saying that we don't do things that denigrate. But the issue isn't addiction. The issue is a state of consciousness. And it may very well be that you stop the addiction and become more of an asshole and violent than when you did it. There's no guarantee that you stop drinking, that all of a sudden you're going to be peaceful. Stop doing antidepressants and you're going to stop being depressed. Because you've accessed your inner trauma from some kind of childhood wound, because you've now gone to Peru or you've gone to Ubud 10 times and done 10 10-day retreats with ayahuasca, doesn't mean that you're free of trauma. It's completely a myth. And these are things that are like, whoa, man, you're really fucking with sacred cows here. All I'm doing was fucking with big pharma. And big pharma has infiltrated big spirituality And Big Brother is alive and well in everything that we breathe and do today, whether it be drugs, dance, sex, polyamory, ayahuasca, meditation, Buddhism, enlightenment. The cult of capitalism has infiltrated the whole world of inner beingness. And one of the most overt forms, and it's not rocket science to get into the depth of that, is how we've been co-opted to believe that we're addicts. And all I'm going to say right now before we move on to the next thing, if you're an addict, reinvent the word and be fucking proud of it. Fucking be proud of it. No, wait. I don't want to get into this particular discussion right now because there's other things we have to really do. But I only want to put that out there is this guy's really down with fucking addiction. No, I'm not an addict. I use things and I fucking enjoy the fuck out of it. I am a sex addict. Fuck you. Who isn't? I mean, I excessively masturbate. What does that mean? Excessively. What does moderation even fucking mean? Who's defining that word? So really question the languaging of how we hold ourselves incarcerated by cultural unexamined beliefs and systems. The whole practice of Dharma is to become liberated from fear, greed, and delusion, wrongly imbuing life with false truths and believing them as real, with eyes wide open. That's all I'm saying. Like, wow, I'm looking at that. Hey, don't fuck with me. What's your sun sign? You can't say I'm not into astrology. I have to say I'm a fucking Aquarian. It's culturally taboo to say, how do you feel about astrology? It's, well, I've got to smile when I say you're just full of shit. And I go, if I were to say that, it would be like, I'm leaving. You can say all you want about addictions and polyamory, but you're crossing the line now with astrology, right? So, okay, you're a Taurus. You go up into this night sky and you look at Taurus, there's a constellation, there's a big, big bull up there, right? How many of you are Taurians? Don't take this personally. Go on Wikipedia and study the constellation of Taurus, and you'll see in astrophysics that constellation, those stars have no astrophysical relationship to each other. They are so far apart. It was completely a mind-made system imposed upon infinity to give the idea of a bull that had an influence. I know the tides affect the earth and gravity and all that shit, but those stars have no more influence on you, okay, than the polar ice cap does right now. What are you saying? When it melts, we're going to overheat. Guess what? There's a cause and effect. That bull in the sky is a complete projection based upon an artificial relationship to a bullshit system imposed upon infinity. And you can ask that bull, are you really up there in the sky? And the bull will say, no, fuck you, human. It's a phantasm in your own brain. You're projecting me on infinity. That's called delusion. We do it with addiction. We do it with identity. The ocean isn't Indian or Pacific or Atlantic. Those are imposed concepts on water. Water has no relationship to its name. When you start imposing names on psyche and source infinity, you start being defined by lies. You've got to really examine how we have imposed culturally, spiritually, psychologically, economically accepted identities upon our souls. The Dharma is to examine those belief systems and to come back to a fresh infinity that doesn't immediately push away Taurus, but is less and less defined by thinking that it holds the truth of who you are. Addicts are in recovery to a lie. Sorry. Pay my rent and I'll say more. Okay, I'm going to come out of the crucifixion of being an addict. Who's willing to do that? Who's going to stop being in recovery? Hold it. Hold your questions. Hold it in your soul. We're going to have time to take all the time in the world to answer them. But I'm very passionate about this issue because I have been in cultures, and you have too, you've lived in them, where basic human rights are violated. The war in Yugoslavia, it was a three-way genocide where women were in the firing ground, where sexual violence was being propagated live on television in Europe's backyard with people that are as good looking as all of us here. In the human psyche, it can believe lies to the point where it denigrates life so much. Oh, Alan, what are you equating? Simple projections into astrology translate into genocide? Yeah. Yeah, they do. We're capable of the very things that we see in the New York Times that we won't read. And so a lot of these struggles that I find that we have in our lives are based upon the adherence to cultural, spiritual, psychological, economic lies. And I would really encourage you, when you examine the word lie in your notebook, it's not about just personal psychological identity lies. Put under examination free inquiry. Like, I was enlightened for about 10 years after I left the monastery, until I started doing coke and alcohol and hiring Osho sex workers for fun, who basically had mercy on me because I was a celibate. And I started to basically say things that weren't true, and I realized, wow, how does my enlightenment interrelate with self-deception and lying? I said, it doesn't fit. So I think either I'm lying or enlightenment's a lie. So I said, enlightenment may very well be true, but I'm lying about thinking I was enlightened. It's pretty obvious, right? That's a gross example. But what identity in you feel you've outgrown based upon who you see in your life? I see my daughter at 13 every year, every 6 months, every 2 weeks, outgrowing identities. We've given up that vocation a lot of the time. I find that so much, I'm not going to rant anymore, so much spiritual work, so much meditation work, so much plant medicine work is about deep adaptation. And I'm so done with that. I want to see you as unique, flawed, profound, vulnerable, inarticulate, imperfect, radically open, pronounced. What are you doing with your life? I'm just being in this weird theater, this inventorating theater of emotions and psychology, trying to fucking do the best I can in a collapsing planet. What are you doing? Deep honesty with each other. So people ask about meditation. I'll close with that. Am I being deeply honest in my relationships to myself? Am I lying? And what am I lying about? So give up anything psychological, spiritual, social, cultural, teachers, shamans, gurus, books, belief systems that you feel that you want to re-examine, and have the ethical courage to really look into that. How many times I've heard that I should overcome my grief. This is my response to those people today. My grief is my lover. I'm brokenhearted, aren't you? I fall in love with you. You're not going to leave me. It's the nature of life to be left from certainty. And I'm going to risk everything to bond with this uncertainty. But I'm not going to hold you in defiance of reality. But I will want to bond with you because you're honest. I hope. I trust that I can see that I'm also walking that talk. So it's a very complex dynamic to stand in the nakedness, and I'll real promise to end with this. I'll end with the beginning. When I left the monastery, I was brokenhearted. I've never recovered. I've had successive relationships in life that have reinvented deeper brokenheartedness. I have not healed in anything, shape, and form through my spiritual, psychological worlds and transformation. I'm more vulnerable today, more uncertain, more outspoken, exaggerated so because I fear conformity. I overcompensate. I'm very aware of that. But when I left the monastery, I left my fucking family. I was thrown out of this country. And so my teacher looked at me, and I was in terrible tears. I hated America. I don't know about you, but I'm proud that I hate America. And yes, I'm not proud to be an American, but I'm born in that culture and I participate in that culture because it's free, more so than lots of other places, and I'm willing to say, Donald Trump, open your mouth and here's a beautiful sex worker who'll transform your sexual work. Or I was going to say something to do with another substance, but it's not going to be said. I've been warned to just keep it physical. But speak your mind, and my point here is when I left the monastery, my teacher looked at me and said, Alan, the world will make you stronger. Simple. When I look at complexity, am I getting stronger? Trust. Trust that the seeds of purification and transformation are within you. Know what they are. Nurture them. And you will be all that you want to be. What are those seeds? Know what nurturing means, and you will be delivered. Those words have stayed immeasurably connected. What are those seeds? Write them down. How to nurture those qualities. How to nurture them. I don't know about you, but I've gone on and on about the yogic thing. I like doing yoga, not just in a studio or on a mat. I like taking care with diet. How many of you care with the food you put in your body? I like supplements. I like exercise. Nurture. How are you nurturing your grief? How are you nurturing your prediction of death? How are you nurturing the look in the mirror and seeing the loss of beauty in the terms of cultural beliefs? Nurture, and you will be delivered. And my teachers were really, he said, Alan, when you look at a flower, he wrote a book called Beautiful States of Mind. This is not my words. Can you see that flower opening? This is where the word trust comes in. You invest so little, so much into the day-to-day, don't we? Implicit in that action, we're in an immeasurable circumstance of opening. We don't know where to or why, but it seems a far better way to look at life than closing. So, take a break. Hold that question if you would. I'm sorry?
It's a practical question.
Go ahead.
My notebook. Has anybody got a couple of pages they can spare?
This gentleman needs a couple of pages. You've got them right here. Okay, I don't know what time it is. What time is it? 10. So if you could take 10 minutes, stretch, move, stay silent. 10 after 10, we're going to come in. We're going to do another meditation, silent meditation. Thank you. Restrooms are on the side, front and back. Let me turn this off. Hold on.